Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Halley, and I'm going to walk you through Lab 1, and please ignore the rooster. Alright, so first thing we need to do is get our goggles, because you're going to be working with chemicals, and it's always a good idea to... Rooster's going crazy. Alright, so it's always a good idea to wear your safety equipment, regardless of how dangerous stuff you're working on with. So we got our goggles and gloves, and we're also taking some other safety precautions because we're working outside, and that's just because we're going to be using ammonia, and we don't want to breathe it. It's not too fun. Okay, so we have our gloves on, and another thing you need to do is make sure that your scale is ready, or your balance. So what I had to do with mine was open the back and then remove a little plastic tab for the battery. Okay, so first thing we do, let me pull this camera on it. We're gonna hit, okay, so we're gonna hit on, and that should turn it on. There we go. I don't know if anyone can read the measurement there. Okay, there, looks like 0. All right, so that's what we're gonna do. And then if we add anything new to it, let's see, the first thing we're supposed to put on there is, let's see. So we're supposed to put our 30 ml plastic beaker on there. So that's this little guy, if you are unsure. And you can always just look for the measurements there to see which one we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to put that on the balance like so. Turn it on, and then we'll see that it's actually giving us a reading, and we need to tare it, which is basically just adjusting for the mass of that beaker. Okay, so put that on there, and now it's reading 0, so we've correctly tared it. All right, so second step, we're going to add approximately 1 gram of plant food. So this is the plant food I got. It's just Miracle Grow. It's for tomatoes, because I think I'd actually make some tomatoes at some point, or grow them. All right, so we need just 1 gram. So I'm using this scoop that came with the plant food. So it looks like this. You can use anything, a spoon, whatever. But I wouldn't recommend using something you're going to eat with. You could wash this off. It wouldn't be too good to eat any of it, though. All right, so let's measure 1 gram. All right, so that's about 1.3 grams. We can get a little more out of there. Okay, still a little more, so just keep going. Make sure you don't change anything on your scale. So that's 1.03. That's probably close enough. We just need to record that in our notebook. So this is what it looks like for me, 1.03 grams. All right, so now we're ready for the next step. Put that aside. Okay, so now we're going to add 20 milliliters of distilled water. So one piece of equipment your protocol doesn't suggest is this graduated cylinder, but you are provided with it, and you also need to purchase distilled water. The only one I could find in my store distilled water was Arrowhead brand, so that's what we're using. Okay, and also when you're getting distilled water, make sure it doesn't have electrolytes or anything added to it. It's just pure distilled water. Okay, so we're measuring, and then I'm going to look at it closely and make sure that, okay, it looks good. The bottom of the meniscus is right at 10 mils. I'm going to need to do this twice, right, because we need 20 milliliters. Okay, so this may be a little faster if you put all of your water in a beaker, but I just thought I'd do it this way for fun. Okay, so that also looks good. All right, and remember, you want to get on eye level with your beaker so you can read where the meniscus, or sorry, with your graduated cylinder. All right, so I'm adding that carefully. All right, to the plant food. So I've got this pretty red solution. All right, so now I'm going to place place a filter in the funnel. So it gives you these coffee filters. It gives you 4 of them. So this is the funnel provided with the kit. It doesn't necessarily fit in there perfectly well. So what I do is kind of, let's see, hopefully everyone can see this, kind of put a little crease in it, fold it like that. So now it will sit a lot better. And then all of this goes inside the 150 ml plastic beaker. Okay. All right. So now what we're supposed to do is slowly pour the solution that we've just made, this plant food solution, into the filter. Okay. So some of the plant food hasn't dissolved yet. I'm going to give it a little swirl to dissolve it. We also have this stirring rod that we can use. Make sure we have as good of a solution as possible. So I'm going to stir it. Hopefully everyone can see this where it's kind of going into solution. Some of it's not. We'll keep stirring. So the whole purpose of this filter paper is to make sure that we get out any stuff that's not soluble. So some of this may not actually be soluble, but we'll see. We'll give it a good stir to make sure. Looks like as I stir, it's going into solution. So we shouldn't have too much of that undissolved stuff left over. All right, so we're pretty close to dissolved. All right, I'm going to set this aside because we'll need it later. All right, so now I am going to pour this carefully so we don't lose any through the filter paper, and it will collect in the beaker. Okay, so we'll let that filter out, and while it's filtering, see, it might be a little helpful to lift it up so it can filter a little more easily. All right, so next we are going to wash the 30 ml beaker with another 10 mils of water, and that's just to make sure. It's always good to wash anytime you have a solution, just to make sure that you've got as much of the solution as possible. And I'm going to measure this 10 mils in a graduated cylinder because it's much more accurate than the readings that are on the beaker, which is not particularly accurate. Okay, so there's 10 mils checking, eye level. All right, so when it says wash, what it usually means is you're basically trying to get any leftover stuff from that solution into the beaker. Okay, so then we're going to pour that back through so we get all of it. Okay. So the idea is that we put this 1.03 grams of plant food into the solution, and now hopefully we've gotten it all. Yeah, sorry, there's my wife's hands. You might be able to see over there. Thanks for. Okay, all right. So now we're ready for the next step. So we've got everything into the beaker, and we've filtered everything out. So let's see. All right, so after the solution has been collected in the 150 ml plastic beaker, we're going to remove the funnel and discard the filter paper. So we're finished with all this stuff, and you might notice we've lost a little bit of solution in there. So what I would recommend is maybe give it a little bit of a squeeze just to get anything out that we didn't get. Okay. All right, so we're ready to move on from that. We're putting this aside. Okay, so now we have about 30 mils of this plant food solution left over. Okay, so Now it's time to make a different solution, and this time we're going to make a magnesium sulfate solution. Okay, so this is included in your kit. So we're going to weigh some magnesium sulfate in a 50 ml glass beaker. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do is, since I use my stir rod, I'm going to rinse it off just so we get rid of all of that stuff. Ideally we'd have a totally different stir rod, but we're going to need this in a minute, so we'll just rinse that off by running water from the wash bottle down into this beaker that we've already used, and we'll put that aside. That'll just be our waste beaker from now on. Okay, so now we need our scale one more time. So let's get that out. Okay, so we have our scale, and we're going to place our 50 ml glass beaker on it, and we're going to measure 2.5 grams. Okay, so let's turn it on. If we turn it on with the beaker, it should tare. Okay, good. So we know it's tared because it's giving us a 0 reading. If everyone can see that. All right. So now let's add 2. Let's see, I'm trying to record this and add at the same time. So well, here, I'll just do it so just kind of gently shake this magnesium sulfate. So Rooster is really excited about magnesium sulfate. Okay. So we have close to the right amount. I think we need to remove a grain or so. So I'm just going to get this spoon. So we have 2.52 grams, and I'm not sure if you can see that. So we're just going to try to remove a little bit, shake it back in. Alright, so close. There we go, exactly 2.50 grams. So always be as accurate as possible in your measurements. Okay, so we're finished with that. Alright, so now we are ready for the next step. So now we need to add 25 milliliters of water. Okay, so we'll do 2.5 graduated cylinders full. So the way this has told us to make the solution is a little quick and dirty. If we're going to be very precise about making solutions, you need to account for the volume that the solute or the salt you're adding is, right? So those little crystals that we add, they actually take up some volume. I think this is let's make it seriously. So okay, we'll get it close, right? We'll just add 20 mils, then we'll stir it up, right, using our stirring rod. And I washed this off so we're not contaminating it with anything from the plant food solution. Okay, so you can see the stuff's kind of going to solution slowly. So we want it to go completely into solution. So it says we're 2 minutes. I may add a little more water to help. It's starting to go. Alright, it's looking pretty good. I still see a few crystals left over. Still a few more crystals. Okay, so I'm gonna put in like maybe two more milliliters of water. And I'm not going to be too accurate because I'm going to go in and measure again. A little more water should help it dissolve a little more quickly. So still just see like a couple more crystals. So we'll keep going until we've got them all. Okay, so after we've gotten everything to dissolve, we're going to carefully pour this back into the graduated cylinder. So ideally we'd have a bigger one. Okay, so let's see. I overshot that. So we've got 10. Alright, make sure we're right on eye level. So we've got 10. I'm going to pour it into this cup for now. So I think we'll have to rinse this cup if we use it again. Alright, but we've got 10. And then let's see. We've got 20. So remember the final volume of the solution is supposed to be 25. So we're just going to try to measure 5 more mils. Alright, so there's 20. Okay, so we've got 20, a little over 24 mils. Okay, so I'm gonna add just a touch more water here, hopefully under a mil, and rinse it around in there so we get every little last bit of that magnesium sulfate. Okay, and then we're just shy of 5 mils, so we'll make it up. Okay, so now we have a perfectly made solution. I'll add them all together so that we have the same concentration all throughout. Stir it up. And make sure we get all the little drops. And we'll pour it back into this beaker because that's where it wanted us to have it. And we'll rinse this cup for further use in case we need it. Get all the magnesium sulfate out. And I'm pouring that back into the waste beaker. Okay. Alright, so now we're ready for our next step. We're going to pour the magnesium sulfate solution into the filtrate. The filtrate is the stuff that came out of the filter. Okay. So we're going to pour that. So it says, I guess we're going to pour it all. Right? So we're going to pour it into the solution and stir for 15 seconds. Okay. So whenever I pour two solutions together, I always like to tip the beaker and kind of add to the edge. It just helps you control any kind of splashes. You don't want to add things too quickly. We've got a drop in there. Let's try to shake it out. Okay. All right. So now we're supposed to stir this for 15 seconds. Okay. Alright, so notice it doesn't really look like anything happened. Still perfectly clear. Um, all it is, it just looks like a more dilute color from what we had at the beginning. Okay. So let's, since we use this magnesium for magnesium sulfate, we need to rinse out our graduated cylinder one more time. So hold on a second. Just rinsing that with distilled water. Make sure you get all the little drops out, and I'm pouring that back into the waste beaker. Okay, so now we're ready for, now again we're outside because we're using ammonia. It's well ventilated, and we're going to measure out 40 milliliters of ammonia. So here's what I got. Just got this from Safeway. It's all-purpose ammonia limits, and it says that was fine in the protocol. Okay, so now we're going to carefully measure out 40 milliliters. And I'm going to pour this into this cleaned beaker that we were using for magnesium sulfate. So there's one. Let's do this 3 more times. Okay, got a little too much, so I'm pouring that into the waste beaker. A little more. Okay, that looks good. So there's 20. Again, we got a little too much. Okay, there's 30. Alright, so now that I've been doing this, I think it would have been better to have poured the ammonia in a smaller container so I wouldn't spill so much of it. We'll remember that for next time. Okay, so there's 40. Set our graduated cylinder aside, and since I spilled some of this ammonia, I don't want to breathe it. I'm going to clean it up with some paper towels. And by the way, we'll need paper towels in a second. Okay. So we have our beaker full of ammonia, 40 mils of ammonia measured carefully with the graduated cylinder. And we are now gonna, okay, so we poured that into the 50 ml glass beaker, and now with the glass stir rod, we're gonna slowly pour the ammonia into the plant food filtrate. So when they say with the glass stir rod, what they mean is that you'll put it here and just kind of add it onto the rod so it doesn't splash. When you do that, see it, let's see, let me get it on. When you do that, it will travel down the glass stir rod and not splash. Because you don't. This is just a way of making sure you get every little last bit of the stuff you're supposed to add. Okay. So we'll put it in there, tap it out, make sure we get it all. All right, so there you go. All right, this class's very first chemical reaction just happened, right? So the ammonia is in there, it's reacting with the nitrogen and the magnesium sulfate, or reacting with the nitrogen in the plant food, and it's precipitating. Okay, so now we are going to, with a pencil, mark our filter paper. I'm actually not going to do that because I'm just going to do this one time for demonstration. But label your next filter paper up on the corner. You could probably label it just somewhere on the edge here. Alright, and then we're going to put this into the cup. Let's see if I can get this on camera. Okay, so we're making a little bowl in this cup. And we're taking our rubber band and putting it around the edge. Okay, so everybody see what we've got there. We've taken this cup and we've sealed the filter paper around it. We're basically just trying to hold it in place. We've made a little cup where we're going to pour the solution into. Okay, so now we're going to stir this solution just one more time so that we've got as much of it as possible. It's going to come with us when we pour it out, right? Because this what it's actually formed is a precipitate, right? Or it's turned back into there's a compound in there that is solid. So if you just let it sit, it will fall out of solution. The whole point of this is to capture it in the filter paper, so we want to stir it again. Okay, so now what we're going to do is carefully add it to the filter paper. And we don't want to add it too fast because it takes a little bit of time for the stuff to filter through. We'll stir it up before we add again. Okay, so if you notice the stuff collecting through the bottom is clear, right? So that means that we actually are collecting all of this precipitate in the filter. Okay, so stir again. Looks like we have some room. We can add the rest of it. Okay, so let's look at the cup. You can see it's kind of foggy. There's a little bit of stuff left over. So what I want to do is, just because I hate leaving stuff behind, kind of put just a little bit of water in there to collect everything that we left behind. We'll add that. Okay. So we have to be careful not to add too much water because we don't want this stuff to redissolve. So we'll let it filter out. That's going to take a while. Okay. So sit here and watch it filter out for a minute. It's coming, but pretty slowly. So again, our stuff coming through is mostly clear, although not entirely clear. Maybe that's a little troubling. So if it's not entirely clear, that means that some stuff is actually getting through the filter paper. Right. So one thing we could do is get some slightly better, and by better I mean finer mesh filter paper that would actually trap all that stuff. But it's still a lot clearer than the original solution we put in. So that means we are actually trapping some of it, which is a good thing. Okay, so this is still taking a while. You could probably fast forward all the way into the end if you're getting sick of watching us filter. So it's saying our next step is going to be to take the filter paper and put it on some paper towels that are on a plate. And those paper towels will draw any excess liquid out of the filter paper. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video right now, and we'll come back and look at it once after this has had time to completely filter.